Welcome to the EGA Sun Region Embroidery Series on techniques and knowledge of needlework. Speaking today is Margaret Kinsey, an EGA certified teacher in silk and metal thread techniques.
Today we're talking to Margaret Kinsey, and we're going to talk about Rozashi Embroidery. First of all, Margaret, tell us some of your background in stitching.
Well, I've been stitching since I was a little girl. In Arkansas, where I grew up, in the old days, you had to do things, particularly if your grandmother was living with you or next door. So idle hands were the workshop of you-know-what. So we didn't, there wasn't much idleness in our household. So I learned to embroider on flour sacks with thread that I bought at the dime store. And I had one needle that looked like a rainbow for many years, because needles even in those days were still kind of precious. It was World War II and after. And I found EGA and joined the Fairfield County chapter in Connecticut in 1975. And shortly thereafter, the first Rozashi teacher came around, and I took classes with her, and everyone that I could find, because I absolutely loved it. It was a great technique to carry with you on an airplane. My husband and I traveled a lot, so this could be held in your hand on the airplane, and in the old days I didn't need magnification. So I worked many hours on airplanes with some of the older pieces. This is my first piece that I took and absolutely adored it, and continue to love Rozashi. It's my nighttime stitching. Rozashi is an old technique, and anytime you have a technique that's ancient, there's very little thread on the back of a piece because they wanted it all to be on the front. And silk in the old days was not made by machine, it was made by man. And so it came through Korea to Japan in the Nara period, which is about 700. And Mrs. Kunimitsu says it's one of the 3 techniques that came through Korea from China. So I have not found anything to dispute that in my reading of the history of silk and silk embroidery. So I'm going to say it's an oral tradition, that it came down through the ages. And it was taught by women to women in households. I had a young woman from California last year, I believe it was, emailed me and wanted a piece of embroidery, and she was going to Japan. So she was going to have her mom teach her with one of my pieces, which I felt very honored. And so it is not an embroidery that has a certification. It's been done in families, through families. Mrs. Kunimitsu was my sensei, Fumiko Ozaki's mother, and they learned that way. Now, Fumiko has a daughter, but I don't know if she is going to continue with her mother's tradition. We've had wonderful success in the United States, and then I spent in 2012 a month in New Zealand teaching to the guilds there. I taught at their conference, and then traveled the 2 islands for a month, lecturing and giving this little, and with lots of pieces to show. So it's been a wonderful adventure for me, a little girl from Arkansas that learned to stitch on her front porch to spread the word around the world. So.
Has it always been a decorative embroidery? I mean, what do the Japanese do with their Rozashi pieces?
They applique it onto obis. There is one obi that is totally done in Rozashi, but mostly it's appliques on. Today it's purses as well as decorative things. They can applique, the little fish is an applique, and if you do a piece with a back that has a background, you've got to cover the whole thing. There can be no voids. But you can use it as an applique, and they use the obi. Many of them are just appliques onto the beautiful silks.
It's medallion type.
Medallion.
Because I noticed, we'll get to it, that they're finished and bordered.
Yes, and I finish a little different than the Japanese do. They like to use this gold thread, but I don't think it's thick enough, so I use our commercial braids for my hiding the sides.
Shall we talk a little bit about what the materials are that you use?
Yes, the robe is a silk gauze. It's also the summer robe fabric in different weaves. This one is highly starched, sized if you want to use that word, and it does not make squares. It makes rectangles. So if you do a close-up of this, you can see that it's got a line of interlocked threads. Let's see if we can put it on the back or something dark. I don't know whether you can see that way. And then this is cut right up against it. And I didn't even put on the fish, I didn't even put a braid around it. I just did it. So the row is pasted to the back of the frame, and they have chops on there, so my husband said, you have to have a chop. So an artist designed my chop for me. The needle, the handmade needle, is longer than the traditional surface embroidery needle. It's, they call it, what do they call it? I've forgotten. But anyway, it's a little bit longer, and they are now so expensive, so instead of, it has a round eye like the eyes, or oblong eye, like the eyes in the needles that you used in when you're twisting your silks by hand. And I have found that in order to save the metallics and the lacquer threads, it's better to use a tapestry needle than it is to use the sharp pointed needle.
I was going to ask, do you use a blunted tapestry needle?
I do for the metals, because the metals are so fragile that you'll be working along and all of a sudden you have one ply out of the three in the needle and the rest of it's bunched up behind. And then we have urushi, which is a lacquer thread, and it is even softer than the gold metallics. And then this is a special thread, and I asked her one time what it was, and it comes, I don't remember, I think it also is a lacquer, but it's just magnificent because it's got a hint of gold in it and it's almost transparent in look. So this is usually antenna and bird feet and that sort of thing when I'm doing those. The regular thread is silk. Rozashi Ito is silk. It's tightly twisted. It is a filament silk, and it comes in 18-meter packs. And today they are beginning to give us numbers. So until
numbers in the sense that you can order by numbers.
By number instead of sending a little card that says, I need this and this and this, and then it's up to her discretion to find it. And then the most fun thread, it looks like the silk gilt that has been reconstructed through Access Commodities. You can purchase it, but it doesn't break. Again, it's a 2-ply of silk and 1 of gold or silver. This one is gold. So they're really fun to work with. You can use either Japanese scissors, or I love to work with the curved, so I don't have any chance of cutting the row, because when you cut it,
I bet there's no repairing it.
it's very difficult to repair. It really is, and that's the voice of experience.
So most of your threads, these threads are a twisted thread, or are
They're
they
all
flat?
twisted.
They're all twisted.
They're all twisted. The metals and the lacquers are softly twisted. These are tightly twisted, and you have to ping them. So you make them look like little jump ropes, and they literally make a sound like a pinging. And when we first did Rozashi in this country, everybody was pinging their pearl cotton. And you ping it because it will twist and knot onto itself. If you don't, you have to give it a good sharp
Wake
cut.
it up after it's been in
Yes,
the
you have to.
packaging for a while.
Yes, because silk has a memory.
Uh-huh.
So it likes to go back to where it was. So those are the supplies, and a magnifier and light. Gotta have.
Are the supplies hard to find in Japan? I mean, I know they're kind of hard to find here. When I first heard about it, there was a question of whether they were going to continue to make the Rozashi ground.
When I started teaching it, there were 7 places you could get row. Today there are 3. And the silk, it is available in several places. You can get it in Kyoto, and you can also get it in Tokyo. And there are stores that sell it along with other needlework supplies. So, but here you have to know somebody. You have to have almost an agent, because the companies in Japan will not deal with me as an American. I have to have someone
Act
in
as a
Japan
middleman for
as
you.
a middleman. So I now have 2.
That's a good idea. Always have one in spare.
Yes, that's very true, because Fumiko is getting old too.
Can we talk a little bit about how Rozashi fits in with embroideries that people might be more familiar with the European embroidery? It looks somewhat like Bargello.
It looks like Bargello, and it's particularly the geometrics. This one has a wave stitch, the flax leaf, diaper patterns. This is one of Buddha's treasures, and I wanted to signify that it was Japanese by the symbol of the chrysanthemum throne, which is the throne of Japan. So this wave stitch is very, very familiar to all of us, any of us that have ever done Bargello, because it's we do it in a 4-2, and this is a 2 period. This one particularly, and it's done instead of wrapping your thread, you step back halfway into the previous stitch, and that saves, they say it does save thread. So I can always tell when someone hasn't done it properly, because they have to ask for more thread.
Right, right.
And if they even on these backgrounds, if they use too much thread, you get lines in it, because when they start wrapping it and stepping just like you would a Bargello, it gives a ridge, and they want to know why they have a ridge in it.
And the purpose, I guess, because you were saying these become medallions, appliques essentially. You
yes.
want something fairly flat,
Yes.
whereas the Bargello,
Yes.
they want it durable.
Yes, yes, and silk is probably the strongest fabric in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we have silk on silk, and then it's all pasted. Everything in East Asian embroidery is pasted, and this is totally pasted on the back. This little fish has three pastings, so you have to make sure that it's stable so you can get it onto fabrics.
You say, I mean, the actual
Literally
finish
paste.
is done with the
Paste.
and whereas we're told never use glue, they essentially are using
Yes.
a glue.
And in the Chinese, when you see the pieces that are double-sided, they are pasted onto glass, and you can't get that off. You can never, you'll destroy it trying to get it out.
And what do they use for the pasting?
We use nori seaweed. It is a Yamada nori, which is nori is seaweed, but actually it's a rice paste, and it is very reminiscent of the paste that we had as children.
The flour paste that we used in
Well, I don't even remember whose brand it was. It might have been Elmer's, but the kids had paste in a little jar, and it smelled so good, and you were always licking your fingers.
oh yeah. Well, it was flour paste.
Yeah.
Just flour and salt, I think.
This is seaweed. I have never had the silverfish and all the other critters we have in Florida to eat anything that I've put this on. So
Pretty good
I believe
stuff.
in it.
Yeah. Well, it served them well.
It did. Yeah.
And I guess it's fair to say, we say that the wave stitch, it reminds us of Bargello, but actually Bargello speaks back to the Oriental.
Yes.
That
yes.
it is an older one. Yes.
Yes. This Rozashi goes back to 800 in Japan. It could be even older.
You mentioned at one point that you have seen Chinese embroideries
Yes.
that have similar
Yes,
elements.
yes. Dr. Chung's book has several pieces of embroidery that are on gauze, and they have the geometric look. And I can't remember what they call it. I'm sorry.
We'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, I'll have to go get my big tome and refresh myself. But yes, it's it could certainly have come from China.
Okay. I don't know. Okay.
This was the first piece I did, and then Maggie had this piece that I thought was just wonderful. So you can see I stole her idea. And this was the piece that I took to an A&G meeting and to stitch on, and everybody was so curious about it because they had never seen anyone stitch on something like this, and I had parts of it done, just a little, and so they said, well, what is it? I said, Rozashi, and okay. Where did you learn this? Well, we had teachers in the Northeast that traveled, and we all took classes once a month. And there would be all kinds of people and all kinds of techniques. So we even had Maura McNeil come from England for the pull threads. And who did we do for black work? Oh, I can't remember her name right now. Doesn't matter. So that was my first piece. This was a piece I was working on, and so then I taught a little butterfly, and this little piece was, I had to ask permission to teach this piece. And it is a real beginner piece. It's got about 5 different stitches in it, and people still say they love this piece, so I guess that's a good thing.
So that, when you say got permission from a designer in
From
Japan?
Fumiko.
Fumiko.
From Miko. I had to promise her that when she asked me to be her teacher, I had to promise her that I would do traditional designs. Piece I have taught a lot, and it is now in kit form. But my husband and I went to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison, and there was this little pine tree sitting up on this beautiful rock formation. The rocks are the most gorgeous colors you've ever seen in your life. So I said, this is my next. So my trees almost look bonsai because they really and truly were bonsai'd by the cliffs. And this piece has gone around a lot. This piece I've only taught once, and it was taught in Georgia. No, I've taught it twice, and I taught it for the Mid-Atlantic region. And it's the tea jars, chiari. There's 7 of them. 7 is a good number with them. Interesting set of patterns in here. And then this one is one that's a favorite. People love to work the maple leaves over the water for whatever reason. Maybe it's soothing to have the water with this little flowing motion.
I think to everybody that says Japanese embroidery.
Yes, yes, very true. Well, Fumiko doesn't like these maple leaves, but they're in the designs over there. Then there is a stitch here, and also in this one, that is the only new stitch, and it came in the Meiji period, and it's looks like a long and short, particularly around this. And there's in 2 of the pieces of the maple leaves there. And then you can see it really well in this sampler. The Magnolia has beautiful use of that technique. I wish there was some way I could teach it on canvas, but I haven't quite figured out how to do it, because it's really, it would make people so happy. Because if you say long and short, and if you don't say needle painting, everybody just goes crazy. So this piece was designed especially for A&G's magazine. I had a woman, a student from Dallas, and her name was Betsy, so this is Betsy's Butterfly. And she wanted me to design one. Again, it's applique, it's on a silk taffeta. She wanted it with those colors. So it was designed especially for Betsy. My daughter Kate is a photographer. So she saw in an antique store in her town that there was some Imari stuff. So she asked the lady if she could take a picture, and the woman said, oh sure. So she let her take pictures of this. And so this was, and her book to me was my birthday present. It was called Inspiration. So this was dedicated to daughter Kate. So, and again, we have the swirling figure, the Bargello, but it's done in muted colors so that you get a different look. But again, here's the flame stitch.
Mm-hmm. And that you were saying that there's no exposed row at the end of it.
That's
It's not
right.
an open canvas
No,
technique.
everything has to be covered. So every stitch, other than applique. And this little guy, I think I taught this at Sun Region on one of the ship trips or something. He is stitched this way, so the row is going on the horizontal, but when you see him, he's this way.
He is adorable. And he's padded, is he?
No, that's just because there's so much paste on the back and it's humid in Florida. Remember the humidity. This was a piece I taught in San Francisco at the last seminar out there. Had a big class in a little bitty room. I can remember that. Sometimes, because you don't need a lot of room for this, they'll stuff us into little bitty places. So this is what do they call them? Dried abalone shells. And they use it as a celebration and celebratory. And this one was noshi in spring. Noshi is the word I was looking for. And I taught this one at Sun Region. Again, I only wanted a little flame, but I got my triangle in. And a few little flowers. I'm a gardener, so got to have flowers.
Are there specific color ranges that are more traditional for this, or?
The purple, the blues, and the peaches, the cobalts, and the rust reds are the originals. This kind of color were the original. And then when that became kind of old-fashioned and flowers came into the designs, then you have a much different palette. So you'll see I can use all sorts, but it's so interesting because I'll use a thread in my work and then I send the samples of the numbers to her, and they come back sometimes very different, particularly the greens. There's bamboo greens, there's evergreens, there's the the camellia greens, etc. So I never know what I'm going to get.
So you're
class.
glad that they're starting to put numbers on
I'm
it.
so happy that there are now numbers.
And they might not be, they might be more consistent.
Yes, except the dye lots are so different. Actually, I'm going to have to, for this class next year, I'm going to have to special order, and they will dye for me. This is a brocade, like the red here, except it has silver in it, and they don't make this color anymore, so I'm probably going to have 200 or 300 skeins of this dyed, and then I'll be using it forever. But I wanted some glitter, and it took me a long time to finish this design. I kept playing with it, and I wanted the background on the vase to be a sort of a crackled look, because there are a lot of pottery from that part of the world that have a crackled look, and the only way I could do it would be with one of the mixed threads or the brocade threads. So it's rather subtle, but I'm happy with it.
I noticed that several of the designs, the fan, that jar, are
Off-center.
off-center
Yeah.
and, if you will, truncated. Is that a tradition? Is that because it's being appliqued onto a fabric?
Yes, and I kind of like to do that because it's boring to do a whole fan, because at some point you're going to have to start repeating patterns. So
It's like second sock syndrome.
yes, very, very true. So this one was kind of fun. I've never taught it. This one is, I love the colors in this one, but again, it's that blue, pinky cobalt, and rusty colors. And what else? And this one is, The flower itself was researched, and they're little triangle-looking flowers, and they're these colors. And I guess they have interesting mixtures of chemicals in their soil to have a pink and a blue in it.
That's lovely.
So that was fun to teach. And then I taught it for EGA, and I put it down as an encore, and they took it off because I hadn't taught it here. So, go figure. I was being honest. And then this one is for A&G next year. They like irises, and again, the water at the bottom. This sort of reminds me of a little bouquet from them, if I had a vase at the bottom instead. So what else do we have?
I noticed almost all the pieces you're talking about are teaching pieces. Do you ever do Rozashi just for yourself?
Yeah, that purse I did for myself. You know, when you teach, you have to spend a lot of time thinking and designing, and
It's
it
your
gets
job.
to be my job, and fortunately I like stitching, and I love Rozashi, so it makes a big difference, I think. If I didn't like it, I would have quit a long time ago. But yeah, you end up doing a lot of them for, I've given away a lot of things that I've done.
Yeah, I think that's true of all of us.
Yeah, because you can only keep
You
so
said you're the
much.
little purse for A&G too, right?
That one is, and actually there's a red one with the red rose for EGA next year. Yeah, this one is, it's their initial, and then the background is all metal and gold, silver and gold. So there'll be, let me take it out here. So I think it, and this just slips in here, so it's kind of neat that it's.
I can't, we'll have to overlay that one.
Yeah. And then, what else do we, I had 25 people in this class. It was a one-day class. I was so tired at the end of the day. But it was fun. But again, you'll see this looks like wallpaper, and this stripy design is something that's very traditional with them. This is an elongated tortoise. There's triangles or scales, and it's just fascinating how they go backwards. And this pattern in this one again is a Bargello pattern. This is ancient. This is not the swastika. This is a Buddha treasure. And it is very, I've had people not take the course because of that. But it's not a swastika. It's far more ancient.
So how would you sum up your Rozashi experience and your will to teach it to others?
Well, it's been a wonderful journey from learning it early in the 70s and 80s to being able then to give back to chapters and stores. I've taught at several shops. It's exciting to see that somebody wants to do something a little more than just the basic embroidery techniques that we do. It's a counted technique in the geometrics, and it's needle painting in the other. So it's an exciting little, small, easily traveled with kind of embroidery. I've enjoyed every stitch I've put in any of it, even those I've had to take out.
And we've talked about all the seminars and classes you've taught, but you do make your kits available,
Oh, yes.
and you have a website, and we'll
Yes.
include the information for the website at the end of this video so people
Okay.
can write it down. And they can contact you for supplies and kits, or just kits, or?
Kits and supplies. The threads are not always readily available in colors, so it's almost easier to take a kit than it is to try to design your own. I do have some people that want threads, and they've been inherited from one way or another. Row. Most of them don't know how to paste.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing I don't think you can learn, but just from reading the instructions, you kind of got to see that.
No, the first piece I pasted on for myself, it took me 2 hours, and then it just kind of went like this, and I realized that in Florida we have to use tacks on the back, so you'll notice on all of my pieces on the back there are tack holes. And it just has to be, because it would just, on a day like today, it would just swivel up. So, and then you have to start over.
Maybe that's an idea for the future. We'll come and watch you spread paste.
I just did that Wednesday. I sat on the floor in the family room, and because my studio is the garage, even though it's fully air conditioned, it's very humid right now.
Oh, yes.
So even though it's all insulated and everything, so I said these have to stay in here. So I didn't have to repaste any of them. But sometimes if I forget and go out there and do it, it's a mess. So anyway, I thank you very much for the
It's a
opportunity.
delight. We are, this is our project, is we're going to capture what our EGA teachers are doing and share it with the world.
Well, I thank you very much for the opportunity.